Yeah.
30,000 people.
Yeah.
What's it like to even just perform to that many people?
It's awesome. It's fun. But it's almost like, it gets to a certain amount of people when after that, it doesn't matter.
Join Vicky OhNeon, the touring drummer and percussionist, as she lifts the curtain on the music industry. Vicky has worked with the likes of Anastacia, Nile Rodgers, Brian May, Hans Zimmer and Zara Larson, to name but a few.
Have you ever wondered what it's like behind the scenes for a professional musician? This podcast will discover just that.
All right then. So I guess the first thing we've got to come up with a name at some point for this, and that I think that maybe over doing a few sessions will maybe be something that will come to light. But I don't know if you have any ideas for names of podcasts. Are you a names type person?
Nothing comes to my mind straight away, but I can have a think about it and see what comes up.
Okay, all right. Maybe we can put some polls out on Instagram and stuff and see if people come up with ideas. That's often a good way to do it. Okay,
something
cool.
with colors, maybe.
Yeah, colors. Okay, all right. I'll make a note of that. Okay, so welcome to Unnamed Podcast. We are going to be doing regular sessions with Vicky where we're going to be diving into stuff that she's been doing recently and just talking about her general experiences being a session musician. I think it'll be good today just to go straight into obviously what you've been doing recently with the gigs that you've been doing for the Eurovision. I just wanted to, first of all, do you want to just give us a bit of background, like who you've been playing for, what actual events it was that you did, and just any information you think people are going to be interested in?
Yeah, so I was in the house band for the opening of the Eurovision on BBC1, which was a super fun gig to do. Just to be up in Liverpool when the Eurovision was happening was so special because they had literally taken over the whole city. Like everywhere you went, it was like Eurovision, 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 Eurovision. And we got to play with some really cool artists. They had really tried to focus on like Liverpool, artists that come from Liverpool, as the majority of the artists we played with. But then there was also a couple of previous Eurovision winners like Conchita Wurst and Jamala, which both of them did really, really powerful performances. And then it was also a huge star from Sweden named Zara Larson, which was like a personal, like, oh my God, I get to play with her. That's so rad. That was also on the bill. And it was like a mad production with like huge drone lighting shows and loads of like people doing what is it called when you hang, they're hanging from cranes, but they are doing what's the word?
The filming. I don't know. I'm not. I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Acrobats. That's the word. Can we cut this out?
Oh, okay. You're not. Okay, yeah. No, it's fine. We're going to keep this free flowing. Like we'll keep this natural. Like, there's no need to cut things out. So yeah.
But it's loads of acrobats basically hanging from cranes on top of the audience, and there's like 30,000 people in the audience. So the whole thing was just like, okay, this is something I'm gonna remember. And the whole house band, everybody in that band are just absolutely incredible musicians. So it's just such a pleasure to play in that environment.
And the acrobats, was that whilst you're playing at the same time? So you're playing and all this crazy stuff's going on simultaneously.
And fireworks and drone shows, like everything was happening all at the same time. And loads of like, depending on what performance it was like a 50 people choir or dance group or whatever behind us. So it was, pretty epic.
That's really cool. And what's it like to try and concentrate on playing in those scenarios when all this stuff's going on? Do you find yourself almost like becoming an audience member at points whilst playing, or you just block it all out? What's the kind of thought process whilst you're on stage?
Well, you kind of want to see what's going on around you, right? But because we are right behind the artists, so they were telling us in rehearsals, it was like, just try to make sure when you're not playing that you're not just like going, oh, what's going on there? Because you're going to be in shot, or it's very likely that you're going to be in shot. So that was something that we learned in rehearsals, that just look forward and enjoy what the artist is doing on stage, even if you're not playing at that time. And then you can watch all the madness on telly afterwards.
Yeah, that makes sense, of course. And during rehearsals, so obviously I'm guessing there was none of the stuff going on. You're just practicing with the musicians. Is it something where you guys practice as just a band? How many sessions do you do? And then you have a guide singer at the time, and then the artists come in at a later date, or do some of the artists come into the rehearsals?
So we were there 3 days rehearsing before the actual event, and the first day was just setting up and just rehearsing with the band. We don't have any guide vocal or anything, so then we just do instrumental versions when we run through the songs with the band. And then the second day, one of the artists came in and rehearsed with us. The third day we moved outside where the actual event was going to be, and then we did dress rehearsals there, because half of the show, or a third of the show, was broadcast and 2/3 of the show wasn't broadcast. So we practiced the broadcast bit when we were outside, because it needed to be dark, or they needed to see exactly what the lights were going to look like exactly the same time as the show would happen the following day. And then we did some more dress rehearsals the following day before the show started. But it was like 15-hour days. So it was quite long, but fun at the same time.
And I saw some clips on Instagram. You were playing percussion, right? For this, or was you swapping between different instruments? What was you playing? And if you are playing percussion, because the one I saw, you're obviously playing with your hands, right? So that's quite an intense thing to be doing for such a long period of time in comparison to drums, which is still tiring, but actually playing with your hands is hard work, right? And painful, potentially.
So my role in this house band is percussion, and it's also electronic drum parts. So it's any electronic loops or one shots that there are, depending on what they are, we sort of chop them up between me and Justin, the drummer. But anything electronic-y sort of usually lands on my table, or if we need to run anything from Ableton. So I'm sort of like Ableton drummer / percussionist on this gig. And I think the problem more with the hands is that when you're outside for that long, it gets cold. So that was a bigger issue. But for the dress rehearsal day, for the actual gig, we were very lucky. Very, very lucky with the weather. It was super sunny the whole day until the evening. If it wouldn't have been that, I don't even know what they would have done, to be honest.
Yeah, that's something you just don't think about, right? Even if you're a musician and you've gigged a lot, but you've done it in venues, often it's the opposite, right? It's too hot at points and you're sweating, but doing outside gigs to the kind of numbers that you're doing, I think I saw it. Was it 10,000 the audience size, or 30,000? It was a big number.
30,000.
I remember seeing that 30,000 people. Yeah. What's it like to even just perform to that many people?
It's awesome. It was so cool to, like, when we were first walking onto the stage, because that's when you could really see, this mass of people, and everybody were cheering, and it was like, okay, this is gonna be a special one, a real special one. It's fun, but it's almost like, it gets to a certain amount of people when after that it doesn't matter how many more there is in the audience, because it's just a sea of people. But the vibes
that's what I was going to
amazing.
Ask. I can imagine. And that's like, at what point does it not make much difference? I mean, I don't know the biggest audience I've played to, but it's somewhere between 5 and 10, but it was so spread out. It felt like 400 people in a small venue. I felt more pressure in tighter venues than in that environment. But 30,000 people in the way that you just described there, it's just such a sea of people, and it's condensed, right? Because everyone wants to get to the front, and the crowd that I saw anyway from the clips from your Instagram page. So that looked mad, and I know it got darker, but there was obviously, it looked quite light at points. So it wasn't like the stage lights are on you and it's only 5 people or 5 rows. You actually could see quite far out, right? And I think that's another thing that's different to when you're playing outside, in comparison to smaller venues or even just bigger venues, but that obviously it's enclosed. do you feel any different at that point when you're playing to that many people? Is there a limit to the nerves, the pressure, or is it like 200 the same as 30,000, or are you more excited? Where's the limit on the numbers? And I know it's different per vibe of show.
I think it's an energy thing, and because of the event, because of people of Liverpool, because of the hype man that was on stage before we came on, it was just such a buzz and energy in the air. So then it just becomes this sort of like energetic exchange between you on stage and the audience, and you just vibe off that, you just ride off that through the whole gig. So you sort of forget to be nervous in some ways, because you're just on this ride with the audience, everybody that are there, and that experience is so cool. I think that's the experience that as live performers we're always trying to get, and then when you have really good sound in your ears and the band is killing it, it's amazing artists that you're playing with, then that whole experience just becomes so awesome.
Yeah. And you mentioned just going back a little bit, you talked about the obviously you did some dress rehearsals with the artist, and maybe some you didn't, it was just an instrumental. When the singers and the artists come on stage, did you have any situations where, you don't need to name names on this, but where maybe the vocalist didn't come in on cue, or have you got everything queued up in the in-ear monitors? Was there any room for any improvisation at any point in terms of length, or it was like, no, it needs, I'm guessing the broadcast had to be absolutely bang on time, like
absolutely
to the second.
Bang on time,
but,
yes.
Yeah.
There's no really room in terms of like structures of the songs, because there is time code that can trigger all sorts of things, both when it comes to lights and fireworks and God knows what. So the structure is very, very set. So it's incredibly important that everybody knows exactly where we are in the song for the whole time.
Yeah. And have you, with some of the bigger artists, sometimes I guess some that maybe are used to having more leeway at points, is there any point where you've, like, as the band, somebody, as the MD or someone's got to try and pull them back in, they've gone off of structure? Has that happened at all? Eva, did it happen?
We definitely had an incident like that on this show, but then once it's rolling, you just have to deal with the situation the best you can, and we did, and it worked out, but it wasn't what we were planning on doing initially.
That's interesting. It's so good to hear, because when I talk to some of my students, and I'm like, they ask these kind of questions, when and I can answer at a certain level. This is a whole extra level up from what I've experienced personally. So it's a hypothetical, well, they're going to have to keep playing and doing this, but hearing it for someone that's actually on stage, and I know that you have to keep going, but it's often when you play with bigger artists, I know in normal gigs, you're as a band, you're there to support the singer, right? So if they go off on the structure, you're often going to move with them, right? To kind of compensate, to make them look good is is the general vibe, right? So, but in this case, it's like, no, we've got to carry on here. We're in the chorus, and they're, and that kind of thing can happen. And it's a very different vibe, I'd imagine.
It is very rare at this level. And also, obviously, that's what rehearsals are for. So you can work out in case there would be any, misunderstandings or different ideas about what the structure is. And most of the time, people come in, and obviously everyone has been sent the music beforehand, so they know exactly what's going on. They come and do one run, and it's like, sounds great. See you at the gig tomorrow. Bye.
And I don't doubt the musicians on that are absolutely on point. I think sometimes it's the artists that come in that are already doing 1,000,001 things, and they're just like, they might do one practice themselves. And it's a song
themselves that they've done so many times, and it might be a slightly different structure for this show that they are used to doing. So that, I think that's also when things can just be a little bit different.
Exactly. No, that's exactly my point. No, that's a really good point. Exactly that. They've always done it this way, or they've had the leeway to do what they want. Now it's like, no, we're going to change the structure of your song, and you have to do it exactly like this. And if they're just in the zone, a singer, right, is just, they're going to be just on stage doing their thing, and they're in the zone. They're not thinking about structure necessarily. And they're there to perform, and obviously that's a whole experience for them as well. Even if they've done it a few times, I can see how it's so easy as a vocalist to just get caught up in it and go off the structure. But yeah, anyway, okay, that's cool. What was the highlight of the whole thing?
Working with this band. Working with this band is such a pleasure, and we've done it a few times now. The MD is called Tim Maple, and he's just amazing to work with. And he attracts amazing, incredible musicians with really good vibes as a result. And it feels really easy, you know, because he's so good at giving you the material that you need so well beforehand. So everybody turns up and they already know exactly what they are gonna do. So often the first time we play through something, it's like, great, next, you know. So and that experience in and of itself is just amazing. That musical experience, yeah.
And I imagine probably quite rare to have it that well organized, even at a higher level. It's,
yes,
you know,
it's very true. And he's so great at being able to completely recreate a track, regardless of what genre, what elements there are in the tracks. He finds ways to get musicians on board that can recreate it. So a lot of the times when the artists come, they might not be used to performing with live bands at all because of the type of music. And then we play it and they go, wow, like I've never heard my song like that. So that's also super fun to be able to recreate so authentically all of these songs, thanks to Tim's guidance and the way he's done the arrangements.
Yeah, that's really cool. As a you know, obviously we went to college together, and like we went to the same place at the same time, and those are the gigs that you dream about, that you hear people talking about, and they are so there's not a lot of them. They're finite, right? Because these are massive events that only a handful of them happen a year that are at this level, and there's only so many musicians, right? And a lot of them, it's the same guys that are already on that circuit. So to get an opportunity is obviously it is amazing. But is there anything else you'd like to say on the whole experience of playing, you know, with the bands, the day? There's anything that you think is like something that's what I've missed and not asked about? The experience as a drummer, as the electronic drums, I don't know, we didn't talk much about that, the kind of doing the samples and that side of things.
Well, that's something that is like I love doing. It's almost like a little niche that I have as a drummer, because a lot of drummers are afraid of electronics and really truly like diving into that world. But so much of the music that we hear today, an integral part of the sound of the song, is the drum production. So if you can learn how to recreate these drum parts live, then, well, first of all, it's a lot of fun, but then you put yourself in a category that a lot of drummers can't compete with, and maybe that's the reason why I've had this gig, you know, because I just love doing that stuff. So that's something that, and because I love education and I love being a teacher as well, it's something that I'm working on at the moment, doing an Ableton course specifically aimed for drummers, where I'm giving them step-by-step tools on how they can do this stuff themselves. Because as long as you like demystify, as long as you like untangle, well, what is this world, how does it work, it's not that difficult. It's not scary. It's super fun. But it often is like finding the track, you know, to learn something and how to do it step by step. And that's what I'm hoping I'll be able to provide with this course that I'm currently making.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm excited about that to come out myself and actually run through it. I can't use Ableton, so I've taught a few music production students that are much more competent on Ableton than I am, and they teach me the stuff. You know, I'm just coming in from a more of a technical standpoint of the how does what it is that you've created sound, rather than how to use the software. So I'm looking forward to that. And you're right. I think it's a mindset thing, right? It's we've been having this conversation about like social media and posting on social media, and people don't do it. They spend all this time creating their music, and making it sound amazing, but then they can't get it out to anybody to get heard. And that's like, you can have the best album song in the world, but if it just sits on a hard drive, I mean, that's it, right? And it's kind of the same thing here. If we spin this with the technological advancements and the fact that drums, you've got all these opportunities to go and play with some great artists, but if you can't use a sample pad, you're just cutting off like a huge section of like potential bands that you can work with. Great for you. Obviously, you're probably going to create a whole set of people that are going to compete against you for gigs in the future. You know,
I know, but you can't think about it that way. Like, I've never approached.
No, of course not.
This. Some people do. You know, they think, I'm not going to share my secrets because then you become competition. I've had some amazing people showing me stuff through my whole career. I've had so much help, so much support, and they are the people that are really shining in their careers. So I've been looking at that going, wow, okay, so that's really how it works. The more you can share, the more you can give to other people, the more comes back to you as well.
I couldn't agree more, Vicky. Like, I say this with that we're trying to build a collective of music schools at the moment, right, and getting people to work together, and but they all see each other as competition, and I'm just like, it doesn't make sense what you're saying here, right? So, for example, I was using this example when I was having this conversation with some people recently. I was like, Drumeo, a perfect example of this. They have made drums more desirable by putting out amazing content and having a great service that they provide online, right? For us as a music school, they're technically direct competition and take up a huge market share, but they actually created the market share, right? That then people often come to us and be like, oh, I've been watching stuff on Drumeo and I just really wanted to have some lessons, or I just really wanted to blah, blah, blah. And like it got them into it, right? So they've actually made more people want to learn drums by default, and the same for all the other ones, you know, that are out there, online music schools and teachers and different people. So it's like, it doesn't make any sense. The more people that learn music, the better, right? The more people that enjoy listening to music, the more of an audience there is. Therefore, the more opportunities there are for everybody. Like, it's a nonsense thing. And I think you're right. Like, and that approach will be one of the things I think that gets people far in their careers. It's just by helping other people and just collaboratively working rather than trying to be like against each other. I feel that's changed a lot recently. I don't know if you agree, but when we were back and studying, everything seemed to all be more and more kind of closed. And I feel like the world's opening out a little bit more, maybe because of the internet, but there's less like there's more demystifying, as you're talking about, and people opening up about how they got there.
And I'm also so grateful to be a part of the drum community as a whole. It's one of the most beautiful communities that I've seen, you know, locally, nationally, internationally. And I feel like drummers are all about that, you know. And at the end of the day, we're still a small community that is being threatened, you know, by computers, program beats, you know, taking over. So if we can then, you know, help each other to keep this legacy of what drumming is alive and then stay with the times whilst we do that, then that's our purpose here, you know, in some ways.
I think that's a really, really good point. Yeah, that's really interesting. There was something else I was going to ask on. You were just talking about technology, and maybe we'll delve into this in some other sessions and kind
I have
of
lots to share. That's probably a whole session in and of itself.
It is a whole session in itself, but I think that it's really interesting, and I think you're right. Demystifying that, like what you're going to do with the course, is going to be really good, and it's coming from somebody that's actually doing it. There's a lot of people out there that I've seen try to do these types of courses, but they're not actually living and breathing it on stage. And I think that's the difference for you here with when you're going to do this. It's like coming at a perspective of like workflow. And that draws me to the point that I'd forgotten. The sounds, when you had to develop all the sounds for the Eurovision, did you have to produce all of the drum sounds, the electronic drum sounds, or was some stuff provided? Was references provided? What was that actual process in prep to play
So
all
this
of
is
the sounds.
another reason why it's so amazing to work with Tim, and he will always provide you with as much tools as he possibly can. So if he has got access to the individual stems from the artist, which they don't always have, depending on, some of these artists were from the 70s, like sometimes they don't have the individual recordings. They don't have the one shots that they can send depending on what the music is. But if he has the one shots, the exact same samples that was used in the produced version, of course he would say send them to me. Or sometimes he sends a loop, or like a bounce of just the electronic percussion, and then I figure out a way to chop it up so it makes sense for me to re-trigger it live. Sometimes there isn't any of that, and then I'm just trying to create my own sounds that are as close as possible to the original.
Makes sense. That's what I thought the answer would be, but that's really cool. Okay, all right then. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. It'd be interesting to get like comments and feedbacks, questions that you've got for Vicky that I can ask, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, super happy to answer any questions about this stuff. So do get in touch and ask all of your questions.